So today we're going to talk about selfies, and selfies seem to be a form of self-expression. We'd like to look at what kinds of expressions selfies offer, or what kinds of functions they perform. Selfies have been studied by psychologists, which may surprise you. And we're going to think about these psychological studies in terms of how selfies help us think about ourselves and others. So, one psychological study gives a summary of previous work, and I just wanted to show this to you to give you a taste of the kinds of psychological studies that are out there. One is about how being exposed to your own profile raises your self-esteem, but subsequently hampers performance on a task. That's a little odd. Another 2013 study is about the relationship between personality and Facebook use. Yet another correlates self-esteem negatively to self-promotion and antisocial behaviors. And then a study about how self-awareness, by looking at yourself, your Facebook profile, enhances your self-esteem, and that individuals who are narcissistic actually engage in more online activity. So the self-presentation, how it's related to personality and how personality is related to the use of social media. This is an article by Seidman, and what she looked at were personality traits. She said high agreeableness and neuroticism were the best predictors of belongingness-related behavior and motivations. Extroversion, that involves communicating more with others on Facebook. But the good news about agreeableness and neuroticism is that even though it makes you engage in belongingness-related behaviors on social media, it also is positively associated with the tendency to express your true self. I'm going back to that original article, the use of selfies or the effect of selfies on self-esteem. This article describes how people use social networking sites, and SNSs, they abbreviate them, social networking sites for attention seeking, communication, archiving, and entertainment. So attention seeking, individuals try to construct and convey an ideal identity, and selfies are one of the best methods for impression management and self-promotion. Another function of selfies is to communicate, and so this is a way of maintaining relationships. Another is archiving, documenting important events, special occasions. And then entertainment. Some people just use social media, social networking sites because they're bored. So I'm going to walk you through an argument I wrote using this Live Mache interface that was developed by the Interface Ecology Lab at Texas A&M. And it's in your readings for the week, so I'm just going to guide you through it. You can click here too on the PowerPoint if you want to get to it again. So it's got three main sections: selfie, research, and envy. So I'm going to look at the first section first. So here are some links. One is to a YouTube video about how to take a perfect selfie. And the next one is a film made out of selfies that a man took every day for 20 years, if you can believe that. Can't even believe we've had selfies for 20 years. Next, I will go to I want to look at the research on selfies, but before I do, I want to think a little bit about envy, because some of this research may involve envy. So now I'm going to talk to you about John Berger's book, Ways of Seeing. In it, he talks about Western art, but he also talks about advertising in one chapter. I've put here in the Live Mache an image of Johnny Depp which is part of this whole complete advertisement for some cologne. I can't remember what it's called. It's men's cologne, and it's by Dior. You can just see Dior's peeking through there. Because it's an example. It's not one John Berger would have seen. He's no longer alive. But it's an example of what he's talking about in his chapter on publicity or advertising. And let's look at that closely. So I'm just zooming in there to read this. He says, publicity is never a celebration of pleasure in itself. Publicity is always about the future buyer. So, in other words, this advertisement isn't showing us the cologne and smelling the cologne and putting the cologne on and meeting people and have them smell your cologne. It's just a picture of the cologne and this man. You don't know if he's wearing it or not, right? But the image of this man makes that perfume glamorous. And I'm going to say more about what we mean by that in just a moment. And he says, the image makes him envious of himself as he might be in the future. What makes this self, which might be enviable? The envy of others. So I'm actually going to go ahead and skip ahead and explain that. Here you see Johnny Depp. And if you imagine, this is an image, not an ideal. It's an image of somebody who's supposedly cool or sexy or something. And I fit myself into that model. First of all, I sit here as a spectator and a potential buyer of the perfume. I sit here as a spectator and potential buyer of the perfume. And I think to myself, wow, I envy Johnny Depp. Then I think, well, what if I were Johnny Depp? What if this were an image of me? If it were an image of me, then other spectator buyers, other people looking at the image, would be envious of me. And what does that do to have other people envy you? Well, for one thing, it makes you feel as if you're happy because you judge your own, people tend to judge their own happiness from the outside by how others see them. And so you will be Johnny Depp, the story goes, if you buy this cologne. So, or your boyfriend will, if you want him to be Johnny Depp. So the spectator buyer is meant to envy herself as she will become if she buys this product. She's meant to imagine herself transformed by the product into an object of envy for others. And that's what I was saying. You want to be envied by others just the way that you envy Johnny Depp. An envy which will then justify her loving herself. Okay? So if I look like Johnny Depp and people are envying me, then it's okay for me to love myself. He says one could put this another way. The publicity image, the advertising image, steals a spectator buyer's love of herself as she is and offers it back to her for the price of the product. Think about that. That's really a hard concept. In other words, you would like to love yourself, but you don't feel justified loving yourself unless others are envying you and saying, ooh, I wish I were like that person. And advertisements help you do that. Buying products that advertise these images. So Berger says there's all these different kinds of advertisements for all different kinds of products, but it's advertising publicity isn't just all of those put together. It's a language in itself which is always being used to make the same general proposal. Buy this so that you can love yourself. So that's really interesting to think about, and it's interesting to think about in relation to some of the research that has been done on selfies. This research has been done by Lev Manovich at the CUNY lab. It's a software and culture lab. And I've put the link in for your readings, and it's also up for this week, and it's also up here. And if you go to his Selfie City project, he's actually sort of organized images that he's gotten from the web, all kinds of images of selfies. He's got millions of them. And he's organized them by place, and then they've been tagged to say whether the faces are happy or unhappy, and everything in between: angry, frustrated, joyous, all of the in-betweens on that spectrum. So then if you look at Bangkok here, you can see that it's on this spectrum that almost all the selfies try to cluster here around happy, and they trail off as the emotions get farther away from happy. Look at the difference between Bangkok and Moscow. In Moscow, it's not all clustered at happiness. It's a much wider array of emotions. So we might ask ourselves, well, what's the difference between Moscow and Bangkok? I mean, obviously there are huge differences, but what we should know is that Bangkok, since the 90s, has actually become the home for many multinational corporations, and is now a major force in finance and business. So there's a lot of capitalist kinds of consumerism going on in Bangkok. And those people in Bangkok are clearly under more pressure to seem happy and to be smiling than the people in Moscow, who are not. They display a wide range of emotions. Well, so Bangkok is a center for capitalist consumerism. What about Moscow? Well, no. The Soviet Union, of course, became a capitalist country during the 1980s, but still, most of the major companies are still owned by the state. It's not really yet a capitalist society. So if you think about that, one of the things that John Berger argues about capitalism, especially consumerism, is that the advertisement, the publicity, the advertisements trying to sell you products, try to invoke envy. And maybe it's the case that people taking selfies are mimicking those ads. In other words, themselves trying to evoke envy. Whereas the users in Moscow do not, because they don't see themselves so much as products in the way that the capitalist consumerists do. Let me know if that argument makes sense. It's all here, and you can, add to it or bring up ideas about it in your assignments for the week. Thank you.